Sometime in the spring of 1820, Joseph Smith, who was still a teenager, went to a grove of trees behind his home near Palmyra, New York, to ask the Lord to forgive his sins and help him understand which church he should join. While he was praying, God the Father and his Son, Jesus Christ, appeared to Joseph, saying, "Joseph, my son, thy sins are forgiven thee." The Lord told him not to join any of the existing churches, but promised that God was going to do a great work. This experience is known as the first vision.
The purpose of this video is to explain what we know about the first vision and how we know it, by introducing the first vision accounts that were written during Joseph's lifetime.
There are four main accounts of first vision that we consider to be first-hand accounts because Joseph either wrote them himself or caused them to be dictated to a scribe.
They differ in their tone, they differ in some of the details that are emphasized, depending on when in his life Joseph Smith wrote them.
The first was probably written in the summer of 1832. It's in the handwriting of Joseph Smith and his scribe, Frederick G. Williams, and it's distinctive in that it focuses on his personal feelings and his need for forgiveness, and in that it only talks about the appearance of the Son.
He's quite vulnerable in this account. He talks about his teenage sinfulness. You can feel the anxiety and the frustration and his inability to find a church where he can find forgiveness of his sins.
The next major account of the first vision is in 1835, and Joseph Smith received a visit from Robert Matthews, who is also known as Matthias the prophet.
He described the first vision to a visitor and recorded that in his journal, and that became also part of the 1834-1836 history of the church.
It is interesting in that it mentions two beings, but it does not explicitly identify them as the Father and the Son.
In the 1838 account, he emphasized that the Father appeared, said, "Joseph, this is my beloved Son, hear him." That was the only account where the Father was actually identified.
The account written in 1838, which was later published in the church newspaper as the history of Joseph Smith. We have an excerpt that appears in the Pearl of Great Price, which is one of the four standard works for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The fourth and final of the four first-hand accounts by Joseph Smith is a letter that he wrote to John Wentworth, who is the editor of the Chicago Democrat newspaper. The Latter-day Saints did publish it in the church newspaper, the Times and Seasons, in March of 1842.
Besides the ones that Joseph Smith wrote or dictated or supervised, we also have some people who heard him talk about the first vision and then wrote down an account of what they heard.
The first one was actually the first of any account of the first vision ever in print. This was done not by Joseph Smith, but by Orson Pratt as a missionary in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1840. The second account is an 1842 account, and it's by another member of the Quorum of the Twelve. This one, Orson Hyde, writes a pamphlet in English, which he translates into German, and he calls it A Cry from the Wilderness. Levi Richards, on the 11th of June in 1843, hears Joseph Smith in a public meeting, and he goes home and writes that in his diary that evening.
He emphasized that he received an answer that none of the churches were right, that they were all wrong, and that the everlasting covenant was broken.
There is a newspaper editor by the name of David Nye White. He ends up visiting with Joseph Smith in the Mansion House and talking with Joseph Smith and hearing from his own lips an account of the first vision. And when he gets home, I believe on the 15th of September, he publishes an account of his 2 days in Nauvoo, including the visit with Joseph Smith. And then finally, we have one other diary account that's very interesting by a close associate of Joseph Smith named Alexander Neibauer. One day he was at Joseph's home with Edward Bonney, and Joseph told them an account of the first vision, and Alexander wrote it in his diary.
You use the accounts as a guide to the total experience and ask how they integrate. The minute you ask that question, they fall into place beautifully.
Also, by combining the accounts, you learn what he learned. And in all the accounts, there's information about what he learned during the vision that's not found in other accounts. So only by combining the accounts can you have a complete understanding of who appeared, what he learned, and then his aftermath.